Greetings and welcome to From the Basement. In this episode, we're going to start taking a look at Chapter 7 out of the Game Makers Apprentice, which is a game about koalas going through a maze. It's actually kind of a fun little chapter. The koalas are cute. The maze concept's actually kind of interesting. And it introduces tiles as backgrounds, which is a really important aspect of 2D game programming. Now, before we get started on this, I want you to go ahead and pause the video and get all of your resources loaded in. Get all of your sprites loaded in. Every single sprite, just get it in. Get all of your sounds loaded in. And then for the backgrounds, just load in the background. There is a tile set that you need to load in as well, but that one I want to do on camera. So just load in the regular background image. This one here. Don't load in the tile set. We'll go over that one together. Separating out your sprites into folders is purely optional. I'm just doing that as an organizational method, so that way we can just, only deal with the images that we want to deal with. So go ahead, pause the video, get those loaded up, and then we'll continue. And so moving on. Alright, so game design first. What are we doing? This is going to be a puzzle game. We are going to have koalas, we are going to have a maze, and the goal here is to help the koalas navigate from their starting point to exits. Now, along the way, these koalas are going to face a variety of challenges that are preventing them from reaching this plot. Apparently some sort of evil farmers involved. I don't really track the story on this one. It's kind of odd. So that's where we're going with this. Now, fair warning up front, I'm really not going to follow the order that the book has for a long list of reasons. So for this particular chapter, I highly recommend you just read through it first to familiarize yourself with where things are in the chapter, and then come back to watch the videos, because like I said, I'm going to be jumping around all over the place on this one. The very first thing I'm going to say is we are not going to do that menu screen until the very end. Now, why am I skipping out on the menu screen? Well, iterative development says, the more you can play something, the better off you are. Now, in true game development, yes, I would actually want to have that menu screen in there as swiftly as possible, because your menu system, your GUI system, is part of the game. You do usually want to include your GUI system as part of your iteration, because if your GUI system is annoying you after testing the game dozens of times, what do you think it's going to do to your players after they've played the game dozens of times? However, for the sake of speeding things up on camera, I don't want to have to go through that menu system every time I hit the play button, especially early on, where we're just simply trying to get things functional. So that's why we're going to push that menu thing off to the side. We're also going to modify the tiles a little bit as well. And actually, we're going to do the tiles first before we even get the koalas up, which is definitely a difference from how the book handles it. So, with all of those words out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. First thing we're going to want to do is load in our tile set into our backgrounds folder here. So I'm going to create a background, because tile sets are background elements. They need to be in the backgrounds resource collection. I'll load background, and I'm defaulting over here. You may have to navigate to wherever your Chapter 7 resources are. And where are you, tiles? There we go, wall tiles. I definitely want to remove background, because, neon green blocks, not good. Now, initially, when I load this in, it's going to just be a regular solid background image. If I tried to use this, it would just, be plastered across the screen as is. That's not what we want. So go ahead here, see here. GI tiles. And so here we go. Use as tile set. Click on that. And it's going to bring up a fairly familiar interface. If you remember from when we were importing in our animation strips, we had to deal with something that was very similar to this. So again, tile width, tile height. How big are these tiles? Well, in this particular case, I know that these tiles are 40 by 40 tiles. Now, one thing I didn't bring up when we were going through importing things in for animation strips is how do you figure out tile sizes when you don't know the original, like, in other words, you didn't create this or you don't have any records of what the tiles should be. How do you figure this out? Well, the easiest method, if you can count out how many tiles across you have easily. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell. But in this case, I know I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 tiles across. My width is 160, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 tiles down, a height of 160. Probably 40 by 40 tiles. Now, the offset, again, works the same way that it did on the animation inputs. Offsetting by 12 by 12, you can see here I now have a 12 pixel by 12 pixel edge. Mainly useful for when you're using external resources. You know, it's not uncommon for people to use the side here or something to record creator information. Now the separator is a little bit of an interesting one. You can see here the gap it put in. How many pixels do each of these get separated out by? Sometimes, to make the boundaries a little bit clearer, some tile sets will include a black line that goes through or goes in between the tiles, and you would have to, usually just a 1 pixel line or a 2 pixel line, you'd have to put in a separator to make sure everything was separated out correctly. This does not have a separation, so in the end, our numbers are 40, 40, 0, 0, 0, 0. And click OK, and that gets us our tiles. So let's get our room set up now. I'd already created this room, there's nothing special about it because I wanted to build my audio resources off camera. But go ahead and create a room. Once you get that room created, bring it on up. Now, you, excuse me, springtime, Kansas is trying to kill me via hay fever. So let's see here. Let's go ahead and set our background. Now, you can have both a background and a tile set. These things are not mutually exclusive. So I'm going to turn off my color. I'm going to choose my background image to background, so I get this nice little stone thing here. I'm going to go ahead and change my snap to a 40 by 40 snap because, well, we needed it that. And then, okay, well, how do I set tiles? There's nothing here for tiles. Well, if I come over here to my tabs, notice one of my tabs is tiles. Now, I can attempt to use my background as a tile, but since I never actually specified the tile information on it, it's going to be treated as one giant tile, and yeah, that's not going to work. So now if I have background tiles selected, there's one important piece of information here. Layer, I always have to count the zeros on this. Yes, layer 1 million. It's like, what? Well, like I said, tiles need to be drawn on the background. If something's on the background, you want to ensure that it is always the very first thing drawn so that everything else is drawn on top of it. And remember, the higher the layer count on an object, the sooner it's drawn. So by basically setting this guy to this ridiculous number, layer 1 million, I ensure that this is always going to be drawn first. Now, you can have multiple tile set layers, which we're not going to deal with in this, but things like Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, you know, the old RPG classics, they would do this. They would have like a background tile layer, and then they would have a foreground tile layer. So that way they could layer things on top to get that illusion of depth. And so this is what this does here. Currently we just have a layer 1 million. If I add in, I can specify a depth, so I could add in a depth that was below or on top of this, which I'm not going to fool with that right now. I just want to make you guys aware of that's where that is. And we're going to be coming back to this number here pretty quick. All right, so how do we use this? Well, we notice we have this little pad here that I can click on, and get a cursor telling me which one I have selected. So if I have this little knob here selected and I start clicking down, I get to place it just like I would any other object. And so let's see here. And we can delete it out the same way. Control right click will erase things. Shift left click will enable me to paint items down. So on and so forth. So let's get a little bit of a border here going. Let's create a border. So I'll grab this down. And these are organized, by the way, into a very intelligent layout setup. You've got tiles going across the top. You have your end caps going across the top. You have your corners going across the bottom. You have your three-way pieces here. And then you have your miscellaneous. You have your pillar, your four-way, vertical, horizontal. So I'm going to grab this vertical piece, paint it down. Oops. Poorly on each side. Now I'm going to take this horizontal piece, paint it across the top. And I'm going to grab my corners. And get those painted in. Now, like I mentioned before, these are background elements. You don't have to do this part here, but I'm just going to create a bouncing koala here real quick. Now, basically just the catch the clown logic here. Oops, forgot my parentheses. Speed of 8. Just to illustrate a point here, since we don't have any moving koalas, because I wanted to deal with this before getting the koalas moving. And, well, I'm sure you can see right away, there's nothing for me to set up a collision with. There's no walls there. And so when I hit, if I put a koala in here, my little bouncing koala, and I hit the run button, zoom, off he goes, off into the nothing. So we've got to deal with that. These are background elements. And as I have said before many times, probably say it a few more times, you absolutely cannot interact with the background element. It is impossible. Game Maker will not let you do it. But obviously we need something here. And this is where, again, using that concept of invisible objects to help control things. So what we're going to do is in objects here, we're going to create a new object. Now this one we actually want to keep. And I'm going to call this object wall. I'm going to mark it as solid. And I'm going to grab, under maze, from my organization, my sprite wall, that solid black square. Now if you don't have a solid black square, there's a chance that while you were going through and loading up your images, that you loaded this one in and you had transparent check or remove background checked. Since this is all one solid color, if you have remove background checked, it'll remove the entire sprite. So if your wall sprite does not show up as a solid black square in the editor, you're wrong. It needs to be a solid black square. You're going to have to reload it and make sure you uncheck remove background. Or you can just go into the sprite edit and I guess use the paint can to flood fill it in. And so now I've got this wall object that I can place down. So I'll go ahead and paint that down. And I think we're beginning to see a problem here. There we go. I think I just added like a bunch off to the side there. That's okay. Yeah, I did. And the problem with this is I can't see my maze pieces anymore. Now, the koala, I can now actually set up interactions on this. I can go to my koala and say add event collision with a wall, and tell him to, where's my bounce? There's my bounce. Bounce off of it. And so if I run it, we're basically back to the catch the clown status here. Off the koala goes, bouncy, bouncy. Let's get rid of you, bouncy koala, because I don't need you anymore. But I can't see my maze pieces now. Not a particular big deal for drawing this part. But let's say I, draw my maze first. And I want to go back and put my pieces over, but I forget a piece. Not to mention, this looks really ugly, too. When we hit the play button, we can see all this black square stuff, and it just, it doesn't look good. Well, hiding that's actually the easy thing. If we go into the wall object and we untoggle its visible property, we'll still see it in the editor. But we won't see it here. But these little wall pieces here, they're still there. You'll still interact with them even though there's no visual elements. But I can't see right now whether or not I've got something down here, or maybe I've got the wrong piece down here. It creates a lot of conflicts, in my opinion. There's a couple of different ways to handle this. One way is to fool with the layer property of the walls. If I come in here to the wall and I change its depth to 1,000,001, so 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now the walls are drawn underneath the tiles and I can see them properly. Now this method doesn't always work. On this particular tile set, on this particular background, it actually happens to work fairly well. But sometimes that technique won't work good. So the other technique to use on this is to fool with the opacity settings on your sprite. So I'm going to open up Sprite Wall. I'm going to go into Edit Sprite. And I will admit I always have to think a little bit on this. It is much easier to do this in GIMP. Here we go. Opacity. And I'll bring this down. You can see here it's now more of like a dark shade instead of a solid color. So I'll hit OK, close out. And you can see here, now I've got like little ghost images. I have no idea why I've got darker ghost images right there. I think I might have ended up with multiple images there somehow. But see, now I've got these little ghost images, so it's, again, I can clearly see where my walls are, but since they still have color to them, the game will still interact with them. That's the key thing. Remember, a 100% transparent pixel will not collide. It does not like doing collisions with 100% transparent pixels. So it's generally best, anytime you want to have collisions, you make sure that that pixel isn't 100% transparent. And so now I'd be able to come back over here to my tiles and go, okay, well, let's see here. I need, this three-way piece here. Oh, right, yeah, I forgot. It doesn't like painting over. So yeah, I've got this three-way piece here, and come down, and I need a cap, a corner here, and a cap here, and so on and so forth. So I can actually draw things out now pretty easily. I'm going to go ahead and remove these, and let's get things set up for testing before we close out this video and move on to the next one. Let's get my tiles reset here. Okay. So when we're testing the koala's movement, the koala is going to have to be able to move within this grid. And there's a couple of scenarios we want to test. We want to test, can we not move through a left wall, a right wall, a top wall, bottom wall, and also a couple of different like wall situations, for lack of a better term. Now, if we have everything blocked out but one movement option, can we still move? And so we need to think about this for a moment and say, okay, how can we set this up so that we can test as many movement possibilities as we can? So I'm going to set up a couple of things here. So this will test, can I move down if all my other three sides are taken up? Here I can test being able to move left and right, even though I've got things on my top and bottom. I will set the same thing up over here. And let's see here. There we go. Oops, wrong piece. And again, this will test the same thing. Can I move to the right if all three things? Can I move up and down if I've got the sides blocked? And let's see here. Oops. And actually, you know what? I'll leave this one as is. We don't need to have the tile pieces looking picture perfect, because this will test quite well, again, here. It also tests, can I have left and right? Can I have left and down? I'm going to grab this piece here. Oops, and actually, not down there. Over here. So this will actually test all of those combinations. Can I, left and right and down, right and up, left and up. And then the final one we need is there. Oops, actually, let's delete those, move that down a little bit. Grab my end cap. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, and so now this is all nicely set up for testing the koalas. Just to go over all the conditions again, can I move down if all other three sides are occupied? Can I move right if all three sides are occupied? Can I move left? Can I move up? And then for, can I move horizontal if top and bottom are occupied? Can I move vertical if left and right are occupied? And then finally, side checks. Can I move, if I've got only two sides covered? And let's see here. Let's just go ahead and put one more in here, because this will test my ability to go around something when I've got only one side covered. We can never move diagonals, so we don't have to worry about the diagonals. And so while this looks a little bit weird, it really is an excellent test setup for making sure that our koala can move properly. And of course, the final thing is to take our wall object here, oops, and paint it down. And so we have the stage set for being able to move our koala around. So let's go ahead and close out this video here, and I'll see you on the next one.